The eighth speaker of the evening is Martin Lynn. Now Martin is a committee member, volunteer coordinator and trainer with the ACT Wildlife Group. Martin has a graduate diploma in secondary education, a BSc degree from the ANU, and is a fellow of the Peter Cullen Trust. Martin has appeared on local TV and radio to discuss issues of water quality in the ACT's urban lakes and has featured in the local print media on similar issues as well as wildlife protection. Martin is also a monthly guest on Radio Landcare, which is a weekly show on the ACT's premier community radio station. So everyone please welcome ACT Wildlife Vice President Martin Lynn.
Thank you. Let's get my timer started. I only have 2 slides. We're looking at that one for a while. It feels like ACT Wildlife has been running for ages. We are not yet 2 years old. We started in February 2013, and I'll show you the scary graph in a moment. But one thing that's been missing from all the presentations is a joke, and my partner is now climbing under the chair as I speak. 2 fish, and the relevance will become clear eventually. 2 fish are swimming along, and quite happily. And one of them swims into a brick wall, and the other one says, "Damn." That was told me by a fish scientist. My professional life is in waterways. One thing that also hasn't happened tonight, and I'd also like to acknowledge that we are on Ngunnawal land, Indigenous Elders, and that is the correct pronunciation. And it is those 2 things, the fish story and the fact that we are on a land that's been inhabited by a number of sentient beings, humans being one sort for so long. ACT Wildlife is about dealing with a whole gamut of sentient beings that really are the poor cousins to the animal community in the way people perceive animals. There was some, Mark mentioned the issue around the kangaroo cull, for instance. Now we don't take a policy stance on this, but within my role as working for an environmental NGO, we know that there are land use issues that have changed over time that are going to cause problems for beings, for animals that have been in this region for thousands of years. Shane mentioned something that's been on the wish list of groups for time immemorial, which is crossings for creatures to move within the ACT region. The dam thing, back to the fish. We have altered the landscape within this country almost irreparably. In the dams form a barrier to fish movement up and down all of the Murray-Darling Basin. 2 of our nationally listed endangered species in the ACT are fish. One's the Murray cod, the Macquarie perch that you may have heard of, you probably haven't. Another one you probably certainly haven't heard of is a trout cod. And we have a listed mammal that none of you, well, I challenge, none of you will have seen in the wild. It's a spotted quoll, larger quoll. The only example I've seen, it's listed in the ACT, it's functionally extinct. The only example I've seen of it was one that was hit by a car on the Tuggeranong Parkway back in 2010. We haven't, our wildlife carrying agency, we have not seen this listed species, and there are a number of species that when you go back through the ancient books on Australian wildlife in the 50s, we just don't see. I remember when the parkway, not long after it was built around Black Mountain, there was a period there for quite some time of a couple of species being regularly seen squashed along the parkway. Swamp wallabies and ring-tailed possums. I haven't seen any along that way for quite some time, and I suspect it's not because we've become road smart. I don't think their population, they haven't got on the buses and moved to Mulligan's Flat. I hope they would, but I suspect their numbers are dropping. And that image from the greyhound training thing of that poor brush-tailed possum strapped to a thing being used for training. I mentioned to Mark earlier, so how many possums do you currently have in care? We have 40 joeys in care, and I have at last count a dozen carers dealing with 40 possums when you're looking at foster care. ACT wildlife is, that's just possums, that's this time of year. We have hundreds of birds in care at various times, and during the summer we end up with hundreds of flying foxes also in care, and that doesn't include lizards, frogs, bats of various species that you would never have heard of, probably never seen, wallabies, swamp wallabies, redneck wallabies, some joeys, and including sugar gliders, species that aren't even in your mindset. Most people know about brush-tailed wallabies, and we know that brush-tailed possums, but they're seen as being more often than not a nuisance, a pest. Same with the flying foxes. They're eating my fruit trees, they're getting tangled in the netting, they're spreading Hendra virus. There's a whole disconnect within our current view of the way we're seeing Canberra grow and develop with what it was prior to that time. The three tribes in the region, the Ngunnawal, the Ngambri and the Narragansett people, used to travel up and down the Murrumbidgee as a major corridor. And those who know any Ngunnawal know that Murrumbidgee stands for Pathway to Boss's Business. And most of that travel was through the region to head up into the Kosciuszko, what we know as Kosciuszko, for main sort of talks and trade. The change in that time in terms of what's happened is those pathways that Canberra, rather than being an escape of movement, has now become a series of islands around the place. Most of the hillscapes that you see when you look out across the vista across the ACT, you'll see Mount Taylor, Black Mountain, Mount Tuggeranong, Mount Painter, the various hills around the place, and almost all of those have become surrounded by fairly impenetrable seas of roads. Added to that is a reduction in habitat just from the suburbs coming in. Look, I'm digressing a little bit, talking about the barriers and the challenges for wildlife. Can I bring up our graph? Do I press a button or does someone else do that? Hey, there it is. This is interesting. 2014. I'll get into other things that wildlife do, which is what I'm supposed to do. The thing I want to focus on, though, is the animals that are coming to care in one 12-month period. We started with, probably about 50 animals coming into care. The last 12-month period, we're up to about 250 animals. These are being cared for by, gosh, if you can even read the scale on that graph. The carers, the number of carers that we have has moved from about, I've got some stats here somewhere, where I put them? We had 23 carers when we first started. We did form out of a grassroots of about a dozen carers in the ACT who've been looking after wildlife through various agencies over the years, RSPCA included, New South Wales Wildcare. We came together to support each other as volunteers to form a new group about for looking after wildlife and to look after each other as much as anything, because caring for, whether it's foster animals, whether it's cats and dogs, there is this care fatigue, and it's as important for a wildlife, for a care group to look after its carers. So that was one of the main aims of ACT Wildlife coming together. We've moved from 23 carers to 32 carers, now working full time. To get to that level of caring, it's taken us roughly, we train, I think it's about monthly. We run a training course every month, orientation, basic first aid. We on top of that train for bird caring, possum caring. We team up with New South Wales Wildcare for echidna caring, koala caring, kangaroo caring, so we cross-pollinate for all those different courses, reptile caring, and we get a lot of people coming through. And to maintain the people that will stay and look after things for very little support, they don't get paid for doing any of this stuff, is problematic. And what we're seeing over time is this incredible increase in the demand for a limited source. Why is that happening? Loss of habitat is probably one of the biggest concerns that we're facing. We are looking at increasing removal of most of the things that our wildlife will live in. All of our parrot species, all of our microbat species, and pretty much all of our possums, apart from ringtails that make their own houses, all of them live in hollow-bearing old-growth eucalypts. For a eucalyptus woodland species to get to the age where you have any form of housing takes a couple of 100 years. It takes me a few months to cut those down and put in a series of houses. It takes no time at all to plan and build a series of suburbs, and it becomes a conflicting interest. How do you marry population growth and demand for housing versus the demand for housing by wildlife? And what we are seeing, back to my 40 possums, a large portion of those are becoming, they're orphans. They're all orphans that are in care, those 40 possums. It doesn't include the adults that have come into respite care before going back to where they came from. And we're standing there and hope to goodness they don't get hit by the same car that ran over them the last time they came into care. The orphans that are coming into care, we have an issue of where are they living. There's competition for available spaces, competition for available natural housing. I mean, this is about futures. I can't separate connectivity of habitat, Canberra Nature Park and habitat health. I can't separate that from wildlife health in the ACT. I see those two things as being interlinked. My children and I are incredibly proud of the fact that we live in one of the greenest territories in Australia. Our commitment to reducing greenhouse emissions is commendable because it takes pressure off those things that lead to habitat degradation. It's not just housing and suburb building that lead to loss of habitat. A hot or dry climate will put pressure on a lot of our species, including wombats, kangaroos, as they're moving to try and find food. They usually, when they're coming in contact with cars, and it's usually during drought periods, when they, what's the time of say? Mine says it's still got 12 minutes. Oh, I should have didn't start. End of presentation. Okay, the future for ACT wildlife. We're doing this, I mean, we would love to not exist in another 5 years because green space has increased. We've got on top of climate change. The rainfall in Canberra's fantastic, and there's plenty of old growth forest for things to live in. Failing that, I think the need for an agency that purely focuses on looking after our second-class citizens is important, and we're currently doing it with very little support. We're doing it off our own bat, and greater support will need to happen for this to continue in the future. Thank you very much.